Well, hello, happy Sunday. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is where you are, it is good. And I am so happy to be here with you. Thank you for joining us here on the live stream. Shout out. I was looking through the comments. I see, of course, New York is always in the house. Bronx is in the house. Atlanta's in the house. South Carolina's in the house. Memphis is in the house. We see you. We love you. We appreciate you. Thank you all for being here. And of course, you can feel free to shout out where you're connecting in from, your city, state, your country, because there may be someone that is connected right here and now in the same space that you are. Well, we have some things to discuss and some things to share with you today. And so I would love for you to join me in our centering prayer. Please repeat these words after me. I welcome the spirit of truth into my mind and let it grow in my heart. Thank you, God, in, through, and as me. Amen. Ashe. And so it is. So it is. Yes, yes. Well, again, hello, welcome. It is so good to be here with you. We are in the second week of our series, Miracle Minded, the 12 Conditions of a Miracle. This series is based on and inspired by the book, The 12 Conditions of a Miracle Worker's Handbook by Todd Michael. And last week we started with the first condition, which is emptiness. And emptiness is an interesting condition and an interesting place to start because, as I said, one, it may remind you of some of the things that we talked about in the masterclass as we began with Open Your Mind to Prosperity. But Todd Michael encourages us to understand that emptiness is an inner and outer experience. The inner experience is the things that we know to do, right? We know that meditation is necessary. And what meditation is doing is supporting us in practicing this condition of emptiness. Also, yoga. But there's also the outer expression of emptiness, and that would be through our financial giving. Many times when it's something that we want, particularly finances, our instinct, fearful instinct, is to hold on to what we have. But the spiritual principle actually teaches us that we have to give. This is just like our breath. If I needed to breathe in, I have to breathe out first. I have to release what's in my lungs so that I can have something new in my lungs. We also talked about that from this context of understanding the principle of emptiness, this condition of emptiness, that what we can actually also then do is we can fast, using it as this, from this perspective, right? That we're not fasting trying to please God. We're not fasting from a place of sacrifice. We're not even fasting from a place of spiritual obligation because this is what we do and this is what we're supposed to do every year at a specific time. But we recognize that it's supporting us in practicing the condition of emptiness. Why is emptiness important? Well, the title of the sermon was Spirit Abhors a Vacuum. See, what's true is that emptiness cannot happen on God's watch. And so as soon as emptiness occurs, God immediately fills it. That's why we practice this principle of emptiness. I'd also love to remind you all that as we studied in our masterclass, Open Your Mind to Prosperity, I encourage you not to abandon what you learned. So while there's specific things around emptiness that we shared last week, there's all the things that Catherine Ponder teaches, right? About releasing things and clearing out clutter, using an elimination list. All of those are also ways to practice both inner and outer emptiness, recognizing, as she teaches, the vacuum law of prosperity, right? That nature abhors a vacuum, that spirit abhors a vacuum, and will always fill an empty space, because that's its nature. It can't help but do it. It's not even like it's seeing emptiness and it's like, oh no, I don't like emptiness. That's not what happens. It just automatically fills. Now, to preface today's sermon, I want to point you all to several sermons that I've given in the past, and I think we'll probably even stream them this week because I think they'll be so helpful, even just where we are as a country right now and so many things that are going on. But when I think about this second condition that we're going to talk about, I could honestly make this second condition an entire series because there's so many things to be taught and so many nuances. But of course, this is something that we've been teaching all the time at CSC. So I want to bring your attention to a couple sermons and invite you to go back to them on your own time. The first one is, and if you don't watch any of them, this is the most important one, I think, is The Next Revolution. And that is from the sermon series, Who is Jesus to Me? from April 2018. So you can go to our YouTube channel, go to the playlist, look for April 2018, the Who is Jesus to Me series, and watch that sermon, The Next Revolution. Another sermon, The Default Position. This takes us back to the first year of CST, September 2013. This sermon is from the From Pain to Peace, the Path of Forgiveness series. Again, that sermon is The Default Position, and that was September of 2013. Another sermon, Making Use of Your Discontent. This was from the Gnostic Gospel sermon series, June of 2018. Again, very applicable to what we're going to talk about today. And finally, another sermon, and really the entire series is also helpful, the Releasing Us series from November 2020. And the sermon specifically is the Truth and Reconciliation sermon that I think would be powerful, and it definitely relates. There's some things in that sermon that relate to what we're talking about. So again, I think we'll restream those sermons as well. I'm going to refer to at least one or two of them because there's some things that I taught in there that apply to what we're dealing with now. So again, the first condition that we talked about last week is emptiness. And the second condition is alignment. And Todd Michael writes this. He writes, the first condition shows you how to become aware of the great power, the great river's current, and how to make contact with and how to make contact with it by cultivating the right kind of consciousness through meditation. The second condition will show you how to further shape your attitudes and actions so that the current will pick you up and carry you efficiently to your desired destination. This is done by a process known as alignment. Now, there's something interesting that he said there. He says, shapes your attitudes and actions. The second condition of alignment shapes your attitudes and actions. And so the second condition, alignment, is focused on how we respond to the events and experiences of our lives. So this is not about aligning with God, right? Because we use alignment a lot in New Thought, and we use it in a lot of different ways. This is not about aligning with God, and this is not about necessarily aligning with the right frequency so we can experience the miracle, right? We can use alignment in that way. But again, alignment is about shaping our attitudes and actions, which then allow the current to pick us up and carry us efficiently to our desired destination. So Todd Michael uses a very helpful analogy to indicate what alignment is all about, what the second condition is all about. He writes, alignment is analogous to what a sailor does with a sailboat. The currents of the winds and water surging all around a sailor are constantly changing, very difficult to predict and totally out of his control. But the sailor has experience on his side. He understands the nature of the currents of wind and water, and he knows precisely how to trim his sails, adjust his rudder, so that the current, however wild and turbulent, carries him exactly where he wants to go. I'm also reminded of another sermon in this moment, Unfurl Your Sails. I think that was a December sermon some years back, right? Which is talking about this idea that this is important as metaphysicians, that we learn to operate as a sailor does, to allow the winds of God to blow us in the direction of our good. And so I think this analogy is very helpful in us understanding just immediately what the second condition of alignment is all about. It's learning to be and do as a sailor does, to learn and understand the winds and the waters, and learn how to work with the winds and the waves, even when it's wild and unpredictable. And always then you're carried exactly where you want to go. The human experience on the individual and collective level will at times be both wild and turbulent. I think it's safe to say that we are collectively living in wild and turbulent times at this very moment. Political violence, a fascist government, record unemployment, the high cost of everything, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. Particularly as you start to consider and think about how these things are affecting individuals and individual families, it's heartbreaking. And I think these are the constantly changing currents that Todd Michael is referring to. But as metaphysicians, we know we have agency in our lives. As metaphysicians, we know that we have the power to respond instead of react. We know that we give meaning to the experiences of our lives and the world, and the meaning that we give it will either lead us to fear or freedom. We know that the power of our thought, and this power is a necessary tool for every metaphysician, for every miracle worker. Yes, yes. Can I get a yes, yes? If you know this to be true, if you believe this to be true. And so I want to take us to what Todd Michael calls the Alpha passage. This is reminding us of what this is all about, that the 12 conditions of a miracle is based on a familiar miracle story of the fishes and the loaves, right? Of the feeding of the 5,000 plus women and children, right? And he calls this the Alpha passage. He believes and teaches, and I agree wholeheartedly, that there is a code that's hidden within this story. There's a way of being that's hidden in the story that we can start to practice, understanding that this is what Jesus always embodied, right? There was a go and do likewise, but there was also a greater things than these will you do also. And so he was demonstrating a way of being more than a way of doing. And so in this Alpha passage last week, we unpacked the opening verse, just a short piece of the first verse of the story as written in Matthew 14. And one of the things that we learned is that Jesus withdrew from the crowd and went to meditate. He withdrew from the crowd, went into, the text says, a deserted place, right? So that he could get himself together, because he had just received word and news that his beloved friend and family member, John the Baptist, was brutally and tragically murdered. He was beheaded. And Jesus gets this information well after the fact, that according to the text. It says that the disciples retrieved the body, buried him, and after all of that, that's when they told Jesus what had happened. And so while the text doesn't tell us about his emotional state, understanding their relationship, we can ascertain that he was definitely in a profound state of grief. We also know, as we've seen in the text, that Jesus was a man that was in touch with his emotions, right? And so, for instance, when his dear friend Lazarus, when he heard that Lazarus died, the shortest verse in the Bible, Jesus wept, right? So we know how he responds to the death of someone he loves and cares about. So we can use our hermeneutic of imagination and ascertain that he would have definitely been very upset. And that's why he withdrew. And so then the text goes on. I'm reading from the New Revised Standard Version, where Matthew 14, verse 13 and 14. But when the crowds heard that he had withdrew and gone to a place to be by himself, they followed him on foot from the towns. When he went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion for them and cured their sick. Now, this highlights something for me that directly points to one of the sermons that I shared with you all, The Next Revolution. Again, that was from the Who is Jesus to Me series in April of 2018. Because in that series, I talk a lot about this use of the word compassion, and I go deeper to really break down what that word means. Because unfortunately, in the King James Version, which is the most familiar translation, instead of reading, he saw a great crowd and he had compassion for them, the King James Version and other versions will read, he took pity on them. And that's not what happened. Jesus didn't pity the people. He didn't pity the fool. He didn't pity the crowd, right? But he had compassion. And that is the better and most telling translation to understand the second condition of alignment. This echoes several times further in Matthew 14, where the writer continues to use, and he took compassion, and he took compassion. Again, in the sermon, The Next Revolution, I break out all of those verses. We also find the same thing being used by the writer of the Gospel according to Luke. In fact, another oft-quoted scripture from Luke 6:36. The King James Version says, "Be ye merciful as your Father also is merciful." But what I share in that sermon and what I break down is the reality that merciful isn't the right word, because again, mercy implies that the people didn't really deserve it, but I'm going to have mercy on them, right? No, the word is actually compassion. Be compassionate as God, our mother, father God, is also compassionate. And the New English Bible, the Jerusalem Bible, gives us that translation of be compassionate as God is compassionate. It is also interesting to note that then there in Luke 6, this is where we get the verses about love your enemies and pray for your enemies, right? And of course, we know that that is constantly misused. And this speaks to the conditions of what we've seen and experienced over this past week. And I'm going to speak generally about it. I'm not naming names because things are happening and we refuse to be tracked, but I'm going to speak truth about this thing. And so what we witnessed this week in the face of the recent political violence is something that I would call misguided compassion. Because it is believed that for some reason, Black and brown people are supposed to pray for and love their enemy, although this particular individual had zero love, and not just zero love, but went out of their way to speak ill of Black people, of Black women, of trans people. And so we recognize that we are not going to practice misguided compassion. And as I break down and we start to understand what it is that Jesus did, it's very clear that what he did is not what people are asking Black and brown people to do in this past week in the face of political violence. Now, to be clear, violence of any kind and the violence that exists in this nation, one is the root of this nation. This nation was founded in and on violence, in violent ways. And so until this nation heals its root, it will continue to experience violence on all sides. But it's important to understand that the text, if you're going to quote this text, it's not asking us to do what some so-called Christians have been asking us to do over this past week. And this, in my view, is not the compassion that Jesus practiced here in the Alpha passage. Now, in the 12 Conditions of a Miracle, Todd Michael writes this: in this section of the Alpha passage, we are being told that the great current is actually a river of love, and that the way a miracle worker sails its powerful waters is by shifting to a state of compassion. That word compassion means to feel with. Compassion is a state of consciousness where others' needs and concerns take precedent over all else, even concern over one's well-being. As such, compassion is the highest manifestation of love. Now, this is the highest manifestation of love. And what we are witnessing is a master teacher operate at the highest level. This does not mean that any one of us who are not master teachers, right, should be admonished or expected to operate at the highest manifestation. But of course, with each moment of our lives, with each day of our lives, we are moving closer and closer to being able to express and to embody the highest manifestation of love. But each and every one of us are growing and growing and growing. As we used to say in the church when I was coming up, God's still working on me. Amen? Yes, yes, somebody. But it's interesting when you consider that Jesus was grieving. Jesus was grieving, and that's why he retreated. But he did not retreat to sit in his sadness. Remember, he was practicing the first condition of emptiness. And so he went to that place recognizing that there was a need to be filled. In order to fill, you have to empty. And recognizing that God always fills an empty space, he retreated to be restored. Remember, we empty to be filled. We exhale to allow the inhale. And so it was from that place of awareness that he could then be aware of the crowd. But because he had gone to a state to actually allow himself to be restored and to be replenished and to be filled and connect with the source of all, and let the source of all heal, and let the source of all restore, and let the source of all replenish, and let the source of all refresh. And so from that place, he could then be even aware of the crowd. It was from that place of awareness that he could even be aware of their need. It was from that place of awareness that he could heal the sick. And this is very interesting to me because this story is always told as the miracle of the loaves and the fishes or the feeding of the 5,000. Just another note, and this is for my biblical scholarly mind. One of the things that annoys me about this is that it's called the feeding of the 5,000. But if you read the text, it says that it was 5,000 beside women and children. So they weren't even including the women and children in the number. So actually the feeding of the 5,000, if it's not a tall tale, was actually the feeding of the 5,000 and so many more, right? However many women and children were there, there had to be thousands more. But when we hear this story, we only think about that being the miracle, that there was, the little boy had the fish and loaves and this was multiplied, and that's the miracle. But the first miracle is in the first couple verses. The first miracle is that having compassion upon the people, Jesus healed the sick. And can you see that this action and this practice is very different from the call by many in this moment to pray for your enemy or the ways in which forgiveness is weaponized as an expectation for Black and brown people in this country and around the world? No. That's misguided compassion. And it's also important to note contextually when we consider, we got to look at all of how Jesus showed up in the world, because it's easy to just say, oh, well, Jesus said, pray for your enemies and bless those who persecute you. Now, I can pray for my enemy, right? And I can bless them and pray that they move to their right mind and come to know who they truly are and bless them. From where I am right now, I can do that, right? And I don't need to post on social media or anything, to try to appear holy to do that. But I can do that in my own time, in my own space. Yes. But it's also recorded that when Jesus saw things happening that he was not in alignment with, we know the story of him turning over the tables, but he didn't just turn over the tables. According to the story, he took a whip and started whipping the people as well. Now, I'm not advocating violence. I'm not saying that that's what we're supposed to do. What I'm saying is that we got to consider the whole being, the whole person. It's the same thing that folks do in modern day. Martin Luther King owned a gun. Right. So we can talk about, passivity and, if more people were like King, tell the whole story. Right. Tell the whole story that those that surrounded him had guns to protect him. Tell the whole story. Tell the whole story about one of my heroes, Robert Williams, powerful unsung hero in the civil rights movement. Check out his book, Negroes with Guns. He defended his town in North Carolina so that Black babies could swim in the local pool. Right. So, it's important that we take in the whole account. We see this in modern history, but we also have to take it into account when we look at this text, that to simply tell persecuted and marginalized folk that they ought to be passive, to tell persecuted and marginalized folk and vilified folk that they should pray for their enemies. Take the whole context in, right? And then let's have a conversation. So I want to be clear, to speak to the moment, to speak to the events of what's happening now. That call is misguided compassion, and it is not the compassion that Jesus taught nor embodied. But this second condition of alignment is powerful, and it's a powerful result of practicing the first condition. Joe Dispenza in You Are the Placebo, he defines meditation as getting familiar with, right? Getting familiar with this realm of everlasting ideas, getting familiar with God, getting familiar with source, getting familiar with this transcendent field. And when we get familiar with the source of all life, we heal ourselves. And when we heal ourselves, then and only then are we able to heal others. What the second condition, alignment, teaches us to do is to welcome everything in. Because this is one of the secrets, as you know, and we teach, one of the secrets to answered prayer. Notice that after practicing the first condition, Jesus was able to take his mind off of his experience. And I don't know about y'all, but I probably would have been annoyed. Because and I kind of put emphasis on it when I read it. I hope y'all got this. Because again, Jesus heard this news. He was definitely in a place of sadness, so he retreated. He went to a deserted place. And the text says, but when the crowds heard it, they followed him on foot from the towns. Can you imagine You just got some of the worst news of your life. And then a whole crowd of people. For some of us in our lives, it's, then there's something that our children want, or there's something that, our spouse or our partner wants, or there's something that your colleague wants, or something that they want at work, or there's something in your neighborhood that's wanted, or just somebody that even just wants something from you in the line in the grocery store. But you're just dealing with this powerful information, this tragic information that has you feeling all kinds of things. And now there's a group of people that want something from you. Now, again, I don't know about y'all. Like I said, raise your hand. God's still working on all of us. We're not living in this highest manifestation of love all the time. But the people followed him. And according to the text, the master teacher, the way shower, our elder brother Jesus, didn't get annoyed. The master teacher, our elder brother Jesus, the way shower, didn't cuss or cuss the folk out. It says that he saw their need. He had compassion. He took compassion. He felt with them, and he healed their sick. Now, of course, we read this story, and ain't nobody asking you to be Jesus. Right? Nobody's asking you to do that. Again, that idea that compassion is the highest manifestation of love, we're all unfolding, we're all growing, right? It's a process. Understand that. But what is the practical application of this second condition? Well, the first is this, and you've heard me say this many times, that a manifestation secret is when you can identify the ways in which your dream, your goal, your desire, your desired miracle benefits more than yourself. You actually at that point have increased the likelihood of your manifestation. You have at that point amplified the very thing that you desire. That's a manifestation secret. That's also part of this condition of alignment, because you're now moving outside of yourself and you're really acknowledging your oneness with all of life. Todd Michael writes it this way: your goal must include the greater good of others. Your success in working miracles will be directly proportional to the care you exercise in this area. And one of the things I was thinking about in terms of Celebration Spiritual Center, I know beyond a shadow of a doubt, the things that PY and I have experienced collectively and individually in terms of the things that we have manifested and demonstrated in our lives, I know that a big part of that is because of our willingness and our desire, just the two of us in this apartment, having a desire to serve and give above and beyond ourselves, right? Not in spite of ourselves, not forgetting our own conditions, because again, what's the first condition? Emptiness, which is about connecting to source, restoring and replenishing. Right? That's very important, right? That's why it's love God, love you, love people. Not love God, love people, then love you. But I recognize that our desires, our goals, our dreams manifest and have manifested because we are also including and working for and towards the greater good of others. So that's one way that we can practically apply this condition. Additionally, the second condition of alignment is asking you to think beyond yourself. It's asking you to think beyond your neighborhood, your family, your community, to think beyond people who look like you, to think beyond people who speak the same language as you. Right? So often, unfortunately, and it happened in mass during the 45 administration, and it has happened in this administration of the felon in chief, that there are those that don't like when I talk this way. Right? There are those that don't like when I speak truth to power, right? And sermons become quote unquote political because they didn't come here for all of that, right? Ironically, these happen to be white folks speaking to me, a black man, when I'm speaking to black and brown people, right? And doing what I know is the embodiment of love. And so there's an opportunity to recognize that it ain't all about you. To recognize that maybe it's time for me to think beyond the box that I live in, and maybe there are other people having other experiences. And so while you may not be Latino and you're not worried about your family getting picked up by ICE, but we have folks in our community that are from immigrant families that are Latino and other cultures and nationalities that are concerned and have real concerns around that. And so when we speak truth to power around that, again, if that ain't got nothing to do with you and your home and your family, but can you think beyond yourself? This is operating in the second condition of alignment. And it's not just about the sort of the platitudes of like, oh, well, I can volunteer and, I help the less fortunate. Again, compassionate is not pity. And so if you're out here trying to help the less fortunate, you're not operating in this condition, right? We center, we serve, and support. We do not help. We do not take pity, and they are not less fortunate, particularly when there's a system in place that has created the so-called conditions of being less fortunate. So beyond volunteerism and beyond charitable giving, which you can do, and that would be supporting you and operating in this condition, as long as, again, you're operating from this space of centering, serving, and supporting versus helping versus taking pity. This also applies to who and what you vote for. Right? If there are people that, don't want their tax dollars to go for free lunch because they ain't got kids. But the second condition of alignment is asking you to get beyond yourself and see the benefit of your city, your state, our country when children are well fed, period. And how that benefits all of us. Right? So then who and what we vote for matters. Whether you vote or stay home matters. Right? Maybe a specific issue doesn't affect you directly, but you can get outside of yourself, feel with, and have compassion, just as Jesus had compassion upon that crowd, and vote from the highest manifestation of love. The second condition can also be practiced in smaller ways by doing what we call paying it forward, by seemingly insignificant or random acts of kindness. Todd Michael writes this: let a car move ahead of you in traffic. Return your shopping cart to the rack. Smile at a stranger. Compliment a coworker for good work. Every time you do anything unselfish and helpful, you bring yourself closer to perfect alignment. Like small adjustments to the rigging of a sailboat, remember that first analogy, such actions help you move ahead in all your endeavors with tremendous speed. And so this is again why the 12 conditions of a miracle are about a way of living and being. And so it's not that you have to do some grand gesture. Actually, grand gestures don't work, right? They're self-serving and self-supporting, right? The grand gesture is what it is. Everybody sees it. Oh, wow, grand gesture. And then it's over. But when you do these things and make it a part of who and what you are, smiling at a stranger, having a conversation with a stranger, just saying hello to a stranger. I don't know if you've ever been there, but I've been there. Like the smile of a stranger at the right time was exactly what I needed. The hello of a stranger at the right time was exactly what I needed. They didn't know what I was going through. They didn't know what I was dealing with. But it lifted me up. It reminded me that I was connected. So out of your connectedness, through practicing the first condition, you then are expressing alignment, which is the second condition. And so in closing, I want to leave you with part of what Todd Michael writes here to take away and think about. He writes, imagine that you take a superb journey overseas. You have 3 ways in which you can pay for this great experience. You can pay as you go, you can pay later, or pay ahead of time. This is true with life. And so what he's inviting us to consider is that the second condition of alignment is asking us to pay ahead of time. So he goes on and he says, paying ahead creates a shock wave in the fabric of cause and effect. A shock wave that travels ahead of you and makes your way clear and easy. This explains why shifting to a state of compassion enables you to attain synchrony with everything that is going on around you in your world. Since the whole universe is a river of compassion, when you shift to a state of compassion, you become one with the river, one with this vast web of cause and effect. The whole universe is a river of compassion. The more we align with the river of compassion, the more we are healed. The more we align with the river of compassion, the more our families are healed. The more we align with the river of compassion, the more others are healed. The more we align with the river of compassion, the more our communities are healed. The more we align with the river of compassion, the more our nations are healed. The more we align with the river of compassion, the more our world is healed. Let there be compassion on earth, and let it begin with me. But let's be clear. This is a far cry from the misguided compassion that some have been calling for in this past week. It is not what Jesus, our elder brother, taught, nor what Jesus, our master teacher, embodied. I want to remind you that if you only choose one sermon to revisit, and we will stream it on our YouTube channel this week, go to The Next Revolution, again, which was in the series, Who is Jesus to Me, April 2018. Because in there, I go further in understanding the definition of compassion as it's used in that verse, and then understanding when we say be compassionate as God is compassionate. Where I take you to is that as we start to really delve into the deeper meaning of that word, what we're being asked is to be like a womb as God is like a womb. And so then we're getting into the mother principle that is the expression of God, and understanding how the feminine is in operation in this. We, of course, are going to continue to move forward next Sunday with the third condition, but I trust that you will sit with this week and ask what is yours to do. Ask within your very own being how you can embody this powerful principle of alignment that leads to compassion in your own life and in your own world. For this truth that has been spoken, I am so very grateful. And to this truth, I say amen, ashe. And so it is.